What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode here of the Desai Guys Football Forum. I'm one of your co-hosts, Norman Desai, joined as always by my good friend, my good buddy, the other half of Desai Guys, Mr. Tad Desai. And Tad, we're finally getting to it. We've been teasing it for the last couple of episodes here. We've been teasing it on all our social media handles as well. We are answering questions from you, the viewers, the listeners, people in our LAFB Slack channel. I mean, Tad, your friends, my friends. I mean, we've been reaching out to anybody and everybody to send us questions that they may have about their fantasy football leagues. It could be super specific, which we have a couple questions like that.
Oh, yes, we
or
do.
it could be pretty broad as well, where it's just like general strategies for how you approach your fantasy football draft. So we are going to try to get through all the questions that are submitted to us. Hopefully, we'll get through all of them. No promises, though. But yeah, we got a lot of great questions, Tad. So it should be
No. I'm going to make the promise. I don't care if we are here for 3 hours, my friend. These people carry us. We will be here as long as it takes to answer all their questions. Please don't have too many questions.
We'll see. We'll try our best to get through all of them. That's my goal too. But just it's obviously based on
3 hours.
How deep we go into a question that will obviously play into time here. But yeah, I have good faith that we should get through all of our questions today as well. And Tad, I mean, let's not waste any time. Let's just sort of get into it here. And guys, I mean, you see the social media handle down below. You see the ticker down below. We talk about this all the time. Like, I mean, we're doing this episode based off questions you submitted. But throughout the season and up until the season, continue to interact with us because we'll answer your questions through social media, through direct messages. I mean, just anything that you guys are asking us about fantasy football. We are here to help you with trade advice, waiver advice, how you should approach your draft. I mean, just options where you're drafting, just anything and everything, guys. Don't be afraid. We're doing it today's episode, but that doesn't mean it stops after today's episode. It continues on throughout the season and even before the season begins too. So, I mean, really quick, you see us on down there below. On Twitter, you got me at Desai23, you got Tad Desai94, you got the show handle at the Desai Guys, and of course on Instagram at the Desai Guys as well. So please do not stop interacting with us. We'd love your questions. Love to help you win some titles this year for sure. So,
and well, real quick, sorry to interrupt, Amir. So speaking of interaction, I'm interacting with a listener right now. First off, he said, is Bijan Robinson a viable fantasy option, which he's just trying to give me trouble for my Bijan Robinson take.
Of course.
But I actually think this is an interesting question. People started going to PPR formats because running backs were too overpowered. Now that switch, is it time to go back to no PPR? I say no. I think PPR or half PPR is the perfect in between with that, is because you take PPR, you lower it a bit, but you still keep receivers fairly relevant, especially since there are so many of them.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that because there's a lot more depth than in your fantasy draft. Because if you're going purely off of no PPR, then it's pretty much if you're not grabbing some of the top touchdown scorers in your league, then you're kind of screwed as far as once you get into the middle rounds. Whereas adding that PPR element, whether you do half, whether you do full, that sort of adds a little bit of extra, just, lots of guys that may not score. Look at Deontay Johnson, Tad. He scored 0 touchdowns last year, but he still finished within the top 30 because he was a PPR machine for the Steelers last year.
That's a great example.
If you take away those touchdowns, Deontay Johnson becomes useless to you. So that's why it's great to sort of keep that PPR element in your fantasy leagues because, that adds extra value to some receivers that may not always find the end zone for some reason or not. So, yeah, I do understand. I have a friend who actually plays in a traditional touchdown-only league, and it brings a different element of strategy to it. But just, I traditionally, for me, I like the PPR element or half PPR element. I think that just, like I said, gives you added sort of depth and gives you added strategy as far as okay, if I miss out on some of the top guys, I can get some of these other guys that will get me a lot of receptions and yards that will still supplement my roster in a positive way. So
there we go. All right. So thank you, Jimmy Wallace, for the first question kicking off this episode. Amira, what we got next?
All right, this is actually coming from one of your former colleagues, and that's Jason Davis. And so he plays in a dynasty league. So he asked us the question: in a dynasty league, should I trade David Montgomery for Alvin Kamara? And so, Tad, obviously you got this question first, so you probably have already been thinking about it. So just what are your thoughts on this possible trade?
So the way he initially framed it, I thought he was trading Kamara for Montgomery. Like he would be getting Montgomery. And I said, no, don't do it. And then he was like, no, I'll be getting Kamara. I was like, yeah, do it. Oh, like, yeah, go for it. That's a steal. And here's why is because this is how you trade, right? You take advantage of people panicking. You take the knee-jerk reaction, the lapse of judgment before people kind of, start to settle in their minds. You take advantage of emotions. That's how you trade. And this is a perfect example of that because Kamara just recently was announced he's going to be suspended for what, 3 games? It's 3 games,
Yeah,
right?
3 games total now.
3 games. So this is a knee-jerk reaction of saying the person offering up Kamara because they're like, oh my God, 3 games and like I can't deal with that, whatever, take him. Well, okay. But when he comes back from the 3 games, and by the way, in some leagues, if they're suspended, you can put them on the IR spot. So if you can do that, absolutely go for it. But even if you can't, okay, fine. He rides your bench for 3 games, and then he comes back. He has the unquestionable number 1 spot in New Orleans compared to David Montgomery, who does not have that in Detroit with Jahmyr Gibbs there. Is it Jamar? What is it? Jahmyr. Okay. With Jahmyr Gibbs there, you don't know what the target split is going to look like. So with Kamara there, I know Kendre Miller. I've talked him up a lot. He is going to be good down the road, but I don't think Kendre Miller is going to make that much of a fantasy impact his rookie year. So Kamara, you get a almost unquestioned number 1 starter. Whether he can be effective in that role, that's another question. But I will always go for the guy who gets more touches over the guy who you don't know if it's the same case.
That's fair, but I guess for me, it's just we've talked about Alvin Kamara before, just like we're seeing the decline already with him, and now we're seeing the supplemental pieces behind him with Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller. So for me, even though David Montgomery is going to have to deal with competition in Jahmyr Gibbs, most likely he's going to be a starter. He's going to get more touches. The key word there is dynasty. So I'm thinking about long term here. So even if
That's
the
fair.
Lions decide Jahmyr Gibbs is the answer for them and they don't need David Montgomery anymore, they have an out after 2024. I had to look it up right now as you're giving your take here. They could cut him after the 2024 season and only take a $2.25 million dead cap hit on their contracts or for him. So if they decide they want to cut him, now David Montgomery will sign with the new team and hopefully get more of a starting role with the new team. So even though his prospects of being very effective with Detroit are kind of low, I like his overall future a lot better compared to Alvin Kamara because we're already starting to see the decline. And in a dynasty league, you need to start thinking about 3 or 4 years down the road as opposed to the immediate. So while I agree with you, I like the immediate with Kamara more than David Montgomery, I like the long term with David Montgomery more. So for me, I would not take that trade. I would hang on to David Montgomery.
See, you're the Oklahoma City Thunder. You're like thinking like years and years in the future. And I'm the Los Angeles Rams where I'm like, fuck it. We're giving up everything to win right now.
That's fair.
It's which mindset do you fall in? But no, I agree with that. Yeah, exactly. It's which mindset do you agree with? Because if you're going for the long-term success, no, I would not take that. But I'm more, like I said, I'm more of like, just fuck it. Win now. We'll figure it out later. If you're more of that mindset, absolutely do this. And also David Montgomery, I hear the weather in Indianapolis is quite nice this time of year.
Especially since they're going to move on for Jonathan Taylor.
Shut up. Shut it.
All right. So Jason, we appreciate the question.
By the way, I want to put this in the time capsule just in case. So my birthday is in about 2 weeks. I'm like 90% sure my friends got me a JT jersey for my birthday.
Seems accurate.
Oof, that did not age well.
All right. So Jason, we appreciate the question. We're going to move on to some of the other lots of questions that we have here. So we're going to go to the LUFB network. It's from the CEO, the big boss man, Ryan Dyrud sent us this question. Tad, is Cam Akers draftable this year? And honestly, Tad, you've answered this question.
I was about to say,
all in on Cam Akers, so I'm going to let you answer this question. I feel like I don't even need to answer anything here.
I mean, I'm going to go through this very quickly because I spoke on this 3 times now, and I'm not even going to lie. I copy and pasted my notes for this one. Fair. Yeah, exactly. So yes, Cam Akers is one of my favorite sleepers of this year. I think that despite the ready. It's like, I feel like you could say it with me at this point. Despite the rocky relationship between him and Sean McVay,
could have thrown it into different words like tumultuous.
No,
You could have said
tumultuous. Stormy
Stormy is a
relationship
good one.
between
Yeah.
between Sean McVay and Cam Akers. I really think they've figured out their differences. And Cam Akers, especially now with Sony Michel being retired, is now the unquestioned number one starter in Los Angeles. This is a stat I always give out, partially because it's absolutely amazing. He averaged 5 yards a carry in the last 5 games of the season, averaged almost 18 fantasy points a game, and that was all without Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp. So if this is the first time you're listening to this episode in a while, go back, listen to some of our previous ones, because I have been talking up Cam Akers for almost 2 months now. He is 100% draftable, and now he is being drafted as a borderline flex option. I'm telling you, he will end up as a running back 2 option by the end of the year.
Yeah, I 100% am on board with everything Tad said. And I've also added to the fact that, what sort of question marks behind Cooper Kupp as far as who's going to supplement that passing offense. You got to look at the fact that Sean McVay will need to establish the running game to sort of give defenses more to worry about. And that's where Cam Akers is going to come into play. Like Tad said, he played very strong towards the end of that season when he was getting more touches and getting more carries. So I very much think that's going to carry over into this season, and he's going to be a feature back, sprinkled in with a little bit of some of the other guys, Kyron Williams, Zach Evans, so those types of guys. But Cam Akers is going to take the lead as far as that backfield there for sure. So yeah, 100%. Cam Akers is draftable. Tad, where do you think you're going to be drafting him? Like, as far as your, ADP, which rounds would you target him, you'd say?
Rounds, I would say like 6 on from that. I think that's prime position for him, especially because, you and I are currently drafting. You speak about long draft. This draft has been going on for 3-4 days now. Amir and I are
beginning. You've never done a slow draft. It seems like, because these take time.
When is this? Is it going to be over by next Friday?
It will be. People will start to pick it up as we get closer to the season goes along. But yeah, that's the whole point. The
season? It's a month from now. Oh, dear God. I hate slow drafts. It's okay, whatever. But we're in a slow draft right now, and it's funny how quickly that running back pool drains. Because I took who did I take first round? I'm blanking on who I took Jalen Hurts. I took Jalen Hurts and Stephon Diggs in round 1 and 2. And then round 3, I was looking, I'm like, I can probably weigh out running back. And then I looked at the depth, I'm like, oh, no, I can't. And so Cam Akers is the type where if that happens to you, where all of a sudden all these good running backs are gone, well, then he's probably going to be there, like I said, from round 6 to whatever. So I think that's a very, Cam Akers is a great backup plan, whether it be for flex or for running back 2 spot.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I think after round 6 is a good target spot for him to add to your roster there. So appreciate you, Ryan, for that question. All right, there.
Got another Jimmy Wallace question. What's the best trio of players on the same offense for fantasy? I say Joe Mixon, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase.
That's a safe one for sure. But I'm going to go with the LAFB network here with the addition of Kellen Moore. We spoke about him so highly so far,
that's a good one.
And I think it's going to make that difference. But I also like the Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, and Keenan Allen trio as well with the Los Angeles Chargers. I also very underrated here, maybe a little bit because of the running back, but I'm going to go to Kansas City, and I'm going to go with Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes. Technically, he's not a receiver, but I'm going to say Travis Kelce.
Well, he said trio. Trio
players.
So
it's general.
Trio,
I'm going to go
players.
Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and then I'm going to say Jerick McKinnon as a deep sleeper. I think he's going to emerge as a high-producing running back in that backfield because we saw it at the end of last season. So stick with that AFC West. I like that trio as well. But yeah, 100%, I'm all aboard with you, with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Joe Mixon. But yeah, the LAFB network's going to be very happy because, I'm high on the Chargers with Kellen Moore, Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, and Keenan Allen.
How about this for a hot take? Kenny Pickett, George Pickens, Najee Harris.
That's not bad. There's a lot of underrated ones out there.
That's a good question. That is a fun question to play with.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk,
Etienne and Calvin Ridley. That's not bad either. I like that one too. I like that one.
Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman. I can't even do that one.
If Jonathan Taylor was going to stick around,
you shut your mouth. You shut it.
That's not bad either. All right, so that's a good question for sure. From the looks like your group text chat there, so that's why we don't have a banner.
They're giving me one of the
on the fly here.
One of the questions was, why didn't Tad hang out with us last night? The reason was because I'm broke.
Unfortunately, I can't answer that one. I don't have deep stats behind that one.
I do have the deep stats. It's I'm broke.
There you go. There you go. That's a simple answer.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, so let's get to our good friend. We actually on his podcast earlier this week, Chauncey Talese, and
That was
he's
so much
asking
fun.
us this question here. Who's on your no-fly list this year? So pretty much just, guys that we're avoiding. I know we did an episode, I think maybe a month or so back, talking about guys that we're just out on, guys that we're in on. But Tad, just sort of either resurfacing that episode with some of the guys you brought up or some new guys, just who are guys that you're just, I'm probably not drafting this year.
All right, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly by one. Excuse me. I went one quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end. So my quarterback is Mac Jones. With the signing of Juju Smith-Schuster, he had, I believe, 23 touchdowns, 11 interceptions last year. He's fine. I'm not going to say he's a terrible quarterback. He's a fine streaming option depending on on his matchup. But in terms of drafting, I am not wasting a valuable draft pick on Mac Jones. Running back, DeAndre Swift. I think this is a name that a lot of people are going to recognize and draft because they recognize him, and especially because DeAndre Swift, that's the name I recognize. The Philadelphia Eagles, they're a good team. This must be a match made in heaven. Take it from a guy who had Miles Sanders on his team last year. The Eagles are the most frustrating team to have a running back with because either Jalen Hurts is going to keep it in the red zone or A.J. Brown's going to catch it in the red zone. Very few times is the running back going to actually score in the red zone. So I think DeAndre Swift is going to be a fine running back, but for where he's being drafted, I think people's expectations of him are way too high. Wide receiver. How about this for a hot take? Mike Evans.
Yeah, not that hot.
Oh, God damn it.
We talked about it before. We're just not a fan of Jeff-based offense. That's it.
Well, not just that, but like Mike Evans has been frustratingly inconsistent for the last 2 or 3 years. And that was with Tom Brady at the helm.
Right.
If he is inconsistent with Tom Brady at the helm, and from all reports, this Buccaneers quarterback battle is an absolute clusterfuck. Like, apparently Kyle Trask is not doing that great. Baker Mayfield is even doing worse. I heard Baker's having a horrible training camp right now. So I don't think the Buccaneers offense. I almost went with Rachaad White last for running back, but in terms of consistency, I don't think Mike Evans is there. I think he's kind of past his prime unless he goes to a contender. So unless he gets traded, I'm not even looking Mike Evans' way. I would. Chris Godwin is borderline, right? Maybe I'll take Godwin. Mike Evans.
I feel the opposite. I'm a no on Chris Godwin. I could be on board with Mike Evans because of the pure volume.
No, but that's the thing. Thank you for saying that. Because people always say the pure volume, but if you actually look, the pure volume is actually not as high as you would think. Is because unless they are in the red zone or unless they are attacking the defense really, really well, if that offense stalls, they never look Mike Evans' way. That's why I'm actually flipped from you. Is because who they look to get the offense going is Chris Godwin, not Mike Evans. So that volume share is very, very iffy. And then finally for tight end is Kyle Pitts. Nothing against Kyle Pitts, but the way the Falcons utilize him is a run-heavy offense, so already his volume share or his target share is a little lower than it should be. And on top of that, it's either Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke. Not a big believer in either one of them. So I don't think Kyle Pitts is going to be this tight end one a lot of people think he will be. So I'm not. There are plenty of other tight ends that I would rather go for. I think Evan Ingram, whose ADP is very similar to Kyle Pitts right now, I trust Ingram miles more than I trust Pitts.
Okay. So my options, I go through mine a little bit quicker here. So my quarterback, I'm going to say Geno Smith.
Wow, that was quick for me.
Sure.
For me, that was
for
quick.
You. Yeah, I guess so.
Thank you.
So at quarterback, I'm going to go with Geno Smith. I know he finished as a top 5 fantasy quarterback last year, but just what I saw down the stretch and in the playoffs specifically, just that I think is a Geno Smith that we should expect. And so I think, this season he's going to definitely crash down to earth. He's not going to finish as higher. So I'm out on Geno Smith. I brought him up before at the running back position. Ramondre Stevenson. I know a lot of people are sort of buying into him being an RB1, but like you talked about with Mac Jones, I'm just worried about this offense sort of being effective enough where if defenses can then key on the running game, they'll be able to stop Ramondre Stevenson. So I think he's going to be effective, but just a lot of people are drafting him as an RB1. I do not see that at all. I think he's more of an RB2 in my eyes. And so, I'm out on Ramondre Stevenson. I'd rather have somebody else overdraft him. But if he slips, then I may take him a little bit later there. The wide receiver position, I actually brought up his name already, Deontay Johnson. So it's I like the fact that he's getting the receptions and the yards.
On the no-fly list?
By no fly list, exactly, because
Wow.
I'm seeing more of emergence Pickett to Pickens. I'm hearing that all of the time through articles that I'm reading and on Twitter as far as things that I'm seeing in training camp and in preseason games as well. So I think that's going to translate to the season a lot more, that, Pickett's going to be looking George Pickens' way a lot more compared to Deontay Johnson. And like we talked about, he scored 0 touchdowns last year, even though he had over 150 targets. So, I mean, that sort of says something as far as who they're looking for to score this offense. So, yeah, I'm out on Deontay Johnson. I'm not going to be drafting him. And then at the tight end position, we brought this up before, but Darren Waller, I think just the injuries have sort of led to him just sort of being,
I disagree with you on this one.
that's fair. I think if he's healthy, he's going to be a dynamic piece of that offense. But just like looking into that offense too, they're a little bit more passive than aggressive compared to what he was able to do in Las Vegas. So I'm a little bit out on Jared Waller. I think just depending, once again, with all these guys, depending on value, I may take them a little bit later. But where they're going as far as the ADP, I think just that's why I'm out on them.
I do have a very exciting live update. Jason Davis did complete the trade.
Wow.
Just went through right now.
So he has received Alvin Kamara, and he has received
Alvin
Kamara.
Kamara.
That's a trade,
Yep,
right?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
There we go. We will see. We will see
how that all
correct.
plays out. So, Chauncey, we appreciate that question. We're going to move on here to one of our loyal listeners, my good friend Jay Boyd, and he asked he has asked us a very specific question here, Tad. So it's not as general here.
This is so specific.
He's drafting in a 10-man league. He's drafting at the 6th position. So his question is just like, what are your options for the 6th position in the first round, and then coming back at the 4th position in the second round, or possibly at the 7th position in the first round, and then the 3rd position in the second round? So who are players that you like at those various positions as far as when they're coming up?
So I will say this real quick. I assume this is a snake draft, given the question.
Correct. Yeah.
But maybe this is a hot take, but I actually prefer where Jay landed. Is like right in the middle.
It's a good spot.
I hate being on the ends. The ends suck because there's just so much questionable of like, if I take a running back here, hopefully this running back is here 9 spots later. And it's just like, if you're in the middle, you're like, okay, there's less, unknown going in there. But anyway, so this is a very good position to be in. I think what you go for at number 6 is, unless there's a surprising, like it's just 5 straight running backs, and this goes for 1-7 as well. 5 or 6 straight running backs, there's always a running back there that people are sleeping on. And I think that running back is Nick Chubb. And Murray can speak to this because he stole him from me yesterday. But
I'm all in on Nick Chubb this year.
Son of a bitch. Actually, that was on Friday because I almost cursed in the middle of my class when I saw that. True story, by the way. But I think Nick Chubb is, I feel like this has been him his entire career. For some reason, he still doesn't have the fancy respect he deserves. Sure. So he is not going top 5, even though he has consistently put up top 5 fantasy running back numbers. So I think you go for a running back that's going to slip. Maybe look, I've been down on him, but Derrick Henry at this point could potentially be there at 1-6 or 1-7. I know some people are kind of sleeping on him. I'm still a big believer in Breece Hall. I think Breece Hall is a potential guy, a bit of a reach, some people may say, but I think
in the first round, I think that might be a little high. Second round, 100% all board.
But again, I'm going off of like, let's just assume all running backs are being taken here. Sure. But that's not realistic because, of course, like 1 or 2 quarterbacks are going to go there. And speaking of quarterbacks, 2-4, 2-3, that's where you go for your quarterback right there. So I would say, yeah. So first round, go running back. Second round, go quarterback. I know people are like, oh, that's a novel take. But the thing is, like, don't get too fancy for your own good, right? Like if, let's say, I don't know, Garrett Wilson is there at 1-6 and like Nick Chubb is there and you're like, oh, maybe Garrett Wilson would be better. Don't do it. Just stay calm, stay the course, and go with the best running back available in round 1. Because like I said earlier, that pool can dry up very quickly.
It's actually interesting because, it depends, obviously, how your draft plays out. Because some people play the more traditional role where they're like, I want to value running backs. So like you said, Tad, 5 running backs could go before you. Then you're sort of left with a lot of good options. Like you could take a Travis Kelce. I think he's a home run pick in the first round. You could go with one of the prize receivers. And I don't think Justin Jefferson will be there. But if he's there at 1.6, I 100% take 100.
No. Forget my advice. My advice. If Justin Jefferson is there at 1.6, you take Justin Jefferson.
Most 100%. Likely somebody is going to take Jefferson before that. He's going to go as a top 5 pick. A lot of people are taking him number 1 overall. So, I mean, that's sort of what I'm seeing as well. But I think you just sort of need to play the percentages as far as how the draft is playing out, I think there's going to be a good mix of running backs and receivers. So, like I said, Travis Kelce is a good option. Austin Eckler, I think, could possibly be there at 6.
That's not
Stephon
bad.
Diggs
That's
would
a
be
good
a
one.
good option. Cooper Kupp maybe a little bit early, but I like him there at the first round, number 6. I don't think he'll be there by the time you pick again at 2.4. And
I was just about
Nick Chubb at 1.6. I think I'm a huge fan of that as well.
I was just about to ask that. You don't think Kupp's going to be there 2-4? Because I think there's a slight chance he might be.
There's a slight chance.
Just because the injury, yeah.
It's a possibility, yeah. With that injury sort of nagging him, maybe it's going to leak into the beginning part of the season, so that may scare a few people off. But that's a sort of like you have to play that game, right? It's sort of a game.
I was about to say, I like you like our viewers on YouTube are seeing the gears turning here. I'm like, do you take that risk of like? I think I take that gamble. I think if Cooper Kupp is there and another running back is there, I think I'd take that gamble of going running back or tight end, like you said, Travis Kelce, well worth the pick of 1.6 or 1.7
easily.
I think that gamble might pay off. I think Cooper Kupp might be there too. God, I love fantasy football season. Like this is not an act. This is not a bit. Like oh man.
And some other options at 14, like Devontae Adams should probably be available. Garrett Wilson, who we already brought up, would be a good option as well. Bijan Robinson. I know, Tad, you're not high on Bijan Robinson, but I think he's going to get a lot of touches. He's going to be valuable. So there at 2.4. He's definitely not going to be there when you pick again later in the 3rd round. So he's a good option there. And obviously Saquon Barkley would be a good option as well. So
I will
those are some options there. And then sticking with the 1.7 to 2.3, it's actually very similar. Maybe some other guys that I throw it at 7 is like maybe CD Lamb would be an option there. Maybe you take a guy like Saquon Barkley, maybe a little bit earlier in the 1st round there. And then at 13, Amon-Ra St. Brown would be a good option there. You also got some of the guys we already listed there. So it's actually very similar as far as 1.6, 1.7, and then 2.4, 2.3. Just there may be a few other guys that may be available that you could pick one pick earlier compared to that one pick later. So lots of good options there. But yeah, I think Jay, specifically is just like, yeah, Travis Kelce's there at 1.6. I think that's a home run pick for sure.
Yeah, 100%. So I will say this is with tight ends. I said this with I believe it was Kelce, was if you feel nervous about drafting a tight end early in the 1st round, when you draft Kelce, you're not drafting a tight end. Just imagine you're drafting a receiver. Because like I know, because I'm the same way where I'm like, it's a tight end, and I'm like, but like it's not a tight end with Kelce. You're drafting Mahomes' number 1 receiver, so get that out of your mind. And a name you brought up that I love is Devontae Adams. I am shocked as ADP. I don't know why he's slipping. Is it the Garoppolo effect?
I think it's a change from Garoppolo to from Derek Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously, the injury history. Like if he has to miss time, then that could possibly be a factor as well. So yeah, I think that's probably playing.
But yeah, Adams is going much lower than I expected personally. So yeah, if Adams is there 2.4, 2.3, just for pure. I mean, we brought this term up a lot. Pure volume or targets. Oh my God, Adams is going to feast this year. So that's a good kind of weirdly slipping receiver you can really, really benefit from.
100%. So great question, Jay. We appreciate it. Let's move on here, Tad. Let's get to the running backs here. So we got another question from Brian Dyrud, the big boss man. Where do you rank Austin Eckler among running backs? So what are your thoughts on Austin Eckler as far as the running back landscape?
I'm currently looking up my exact rankings for him. So I had Austin Eckler ranked as number 4 behind Christian McCaffrey, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley.
And once again, that's where you think he's going to finish, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So that's where I think he will finish as the number 4 fantasy running back in the league. By the way, if you want to see all of our fantasy rankings, check out our Instagram handle at the Desai Guys, and on Twitter, I believe I shared it there, at also the Desai Guys. I like Eckler a lot. I think even with all this contract dispute, BS, and by BS, by the way, I mean BS on the Chargers side. Pay that man, franchise. Eckler, I honestly wouldn't blame him if he sat out, but that's another podcast segment. But I think Eckler is going to be so wholly valuable to this offense, especially now, like you mentioned earlier, that this offense is just primed for a breakout. You look at, Quentin Johnson, he scored last night, by the way. 2 TCU players scored for the Chargers last night. Darius Davis on the punt return and Quentin Johnson.
Nice.
Go Frogs. But anyway, I think that Quentin Johnson is going to help this offense just flow better, especially when, not if, when Keenan Allen and or Mike Williams goes down with injury, this offense is not going to stall like it did last year. And that's mostly because of Quinn Johnson and Austin Eckler and Josh Kelly, and they are just such a complete offense. And let's not forget, who's a more successful Cowboys running back last year, Zeke Elliott or Tony Pollard?
100% Tony Pollard. Like, I mean, that's no
Exactly.
question.
Tony Pollard. Thank you. That was a very long pause. I was getting nervous there. So Tony Pollard and Austin Eckler's skill set is very similar. I think Kellen Moore knows how to make the most of a running back with that skill set. There's zero doubt in my mind that Austin Eckler is going to have yet another great season. The only reason I put Saquon in front of Austin Eckler is because, like I said, that passing game in Los Angeles is a little better than that passing game in New York. So I think that Austin Eckler is going to get fewer touches on the ground than Saquon Barkley.
That's fair. And yeah, I'm 100% with you. Just everything that you said, I echo that. And just that's the reason why I have him ranked as my second best running back behind Christian McCaffrey. So honestly, like, he's going to be involved in this offense. I think you're saying limited in the passing game, but that's where he sort of makes his butt. That's where he makes his money. He's a very gifted pass catching running back. So they utilize him there. Gets a lot of receptions, gets a lot of yards through the air as well. So, I mean, yeah, he's definitely that dual threat running back that you want in fantasy football leagues because you're getting points as the rusher as well as the receiver there. So I have him ranked number 2 behind Christian McCaffrey. But, yeah, I think just he's an absolute home run pick in fantasy leagues as well, for sure. So let's move on. Let's get to the next question here, Tad. So
whoa, you didn't answer the question, though. Where you rank Austin Eckler?
Clearly, you're not listening. I said I ranked him second behind Christian McCaffrey.
Okay, I missed that. My bad. Moving on. I was not listening. I was sending a text.
Clearly, you were not listening. Like, I don't know what you were doing, but
I was sending a
3
text
times.
Don't text in podcast, kids.
Oh, gosh. All right. So let's move on to the next question. This is again from our good friend Chauncey Talese, and he is asking, which player is likely to get drafted way too high this year? So who's a guy that just is getting overvalued in fantasy leagues? I already brought up a name, Ramondre Stevenson. In my eyes, I think he's going a little bit too high. People are valuing him as RB1, but I don't think he's at that level. But it really just depends on how that offense plays out. I do have another guy, but Tad, I'm going to pass it to you here first.
James Conner is going in the 5th round. I had to double check my ADP numbers for that. I was like, 5th round? Really? Look, nothing against James Conner. I know that, yes, that offense is clearly going to move through him with Kyler Murray out, but that's kind of the problem as well, is everybody else and their mother knows that, so they can shut James Conner down. He is not an Adrian Peterson type running back where it's yeah, you can come at me, I'm still going to bowl through you. Not James Conner. If they're blitzing you, they're going to stop you. So I don't hate him as a bench option. But as a 5th round, I mean, that's running back 2 territory. And I don't see him fit in that area. The other 2 players I have real quick are Mike Williams, the Chargers receiver. Like I said, Quinn Johnson's looking really, really good. I think Quinn Johnson's going to eat into his fantasy value a fair amount. Not so much to make him fantasy irrelevant, but just enough where he's not quite where he was. So Mike Williams is being in the 6th round. And then the 7th round running back is James Cook. I don't trust any of these Buffalo Bills running backs anymore. I don't trust them. I think James Cook is going to split carries, and people are drafting him to be a running back 2/flex option. I see him as a borderline flex option, maybe.
All right. So honestly, I was looking at the rankings and I didn't feel that there's anybody going way too high, based off the question here. But I did find a guy that I think is going higher than he probably should be going, because I like the guy that he's playing with a little bit more. That's actually Deebo Samuel, the San Francisco 49ers. And so you look at where he's going. He's going 10 spots higher than his teammate Brandon Ayuk. And so I think just the funny thing for me is that a lot of people are expecting Deebo Samuel to sort of replicate what he did in 2021, where he was sort of that everything, do anything for this offense. And you have to remember that they traded for Christian McCaffrey. And so he's going to take a lot of what made Deebo Samuel so effective in that season away. So I'm not saying they're not going to use him in the running game the way they did before, but just That's why they brought in Christian McCaffrey to sort of take that load off of Deebo Samuel. So is he still going to be effective as a receiver? Yes, but I think just some of that specialness that he brought to the offense is going to be taken away to an extent. And so that's why I like Brandon Ayuk, who's been absolutely the star of 49ers training camp this year. He had a 1,000-yard season last year. Like, I mean, I think he's going to continue to build on that. Kyle Shanahan completely trusts this guy. If you saw it last year, Brock Purdy was trusting this guy too. Brock Purdy's going to be a starter for the Niners as we get to week 1 here. And so I like Brandon Ayuk more than Deebo Samuel, but the fact that Deebo Samuel is going 10 spots higher than Brandon Ayuk, that's where I sort of see like, okay, maybe he's going a little bit too high for me. So in that case, I'm saying that Deebo Samuel is going too high, but I still like both players for sure. But just I like Brandon Ayuk a little bit more.
All right, fair enough. See, your Niners takes always make me nervous especially because I just drafted George Kittle. And I'm like, I actually like Kittle. And you had him listed as one of your busts. I'm like, fuck, I hope I'm right.
We'll see how it all plays out. Believe me, as a Niners fan, I hope they all have amazing seasons.
Sure,
but just looking at the past history and the trends that I've seen, is just like this is sort of how it all plays out. And Deebo Samuel has been working his ass off this entire offseason. He's gotten to a lot slimmer. He's at his college weight now, so he's trying to be more fast. He's trying to be more dynamic, sort of like that rookie Deebo Samuel that we saw. So we'll see. Maybe that's going to make a difference too. But just, in my eyes, I like Ayuk just a little bit more than Deebo Samuel, but yeah, that's just how I would answer the question there. So, Chauncey, we appreciate the question again there. So let's get to another question here, Tad. Also from the Big Boss Man. He sort of has a theme here. So he's asking these LA-related questions, which is perfectly fine. We work for LAFB Network,
that's
right?
Fair. So it sort of makes sense here. We have to pander every now and then. It's just, give the people what they want.
Exactly. Of course. That's exactly what we're here for, to answer their questions regardless of what they are. So he's asking, Ted, is Tyler Higbee a top 10 tight end?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, he's not. No. Okay. You know what? We're going to play your favorite game. You ready? It's time for over-under. Over-under twice last year, 2 times. Did Tyler Higbee finish with over 10 points?
Over.
Under. It was only once. Okay. It was only one time he finished with over 10 points. And look, this is not saying anything against Tyler Higbee as a player. I am more making a statement about this offense, as whether it be Higbee, whether it be Gerald Everett, whether it be like whatever the last 10 tight ends have been in the Sean McVay offense. Look, this offense just does not like tight ends. And that's just a fact that we have to accept. And because every year we fall for this, this fallacy that's, it's a passing offense. It's a very efficient passing offense. Therefore, the tight end must be part of that. McVay is like going back to the 2000s where, you can have a good passing offense without a good tight end. So, no, I don't trust Tyler Higbee whatsoever as a tight end. He is borderline undraftable, in my opinion.
Wow. Okay. So I'm actually going to counter your point here, because even though he may not have gotten more than 10 points in his entire season last year, only once, I should say specifically, he still was one of the more highly targeted players in that offense, because Tad, he was one of 4 tight ends with over 100 targets last season. He had the 5th most receptions and the 9th most receiving yards among tight ends. He finished at the 6th best fantasy tight end in PPR leagues last season. So I know there's question marks surrounding Cooper Kupp. We talked about him possibly having an injury that may leak into the beginning part of the season. We'll see about his status. But behind him, we've already talked about just who's going to step up to be that secondary third option in that passing offense. Like, could it be the rookie Puka Nacua? Is it going to be Van Jefferson? Is it going to be Ben Skoranek? And so just who knows? I mean, we had Chauncey on his podcast talking about Demarcus Robinson. It's like, is he going to emerge? It's just like, we don't know. But one of the big things is that we saw Tyler Higbee get a lot more involved. So maybe as a game-to-game piece, he's not going to be valuable. But overall, throughout the entire season, he still finished within the top 10. And Ted, we've talked about this so many times before. The tight end position is a wasteland. It's a crapshoot. So it's a complete gamble.
It's like Fallout, but in fantasy football.
Exactly. So it's like you look at this tight end position that there could be a possibility where if he sees the same numbers, there's a 100% good chance that he's going to finish within the top 10. Now, I'm not saying that I'm trusting him. That's a completely different story. But I'm saying that answering the question specifically, is he a top 10 tight end? In fantasy purposes, there's a very good shot he could finish as a top 10 tight end. But am I trusting him to be my starting tight end? Definitely not. I think, like you said, with like just getting the points per game basis where he only went over double digits once, that sort of worries me. So it's like if he's only getting, involved enough where he's getting the total numbers, but not the game to game numbers, because you want that game to game carryover. That's how you're going to win and your matchups every single week, right? It's not a total total player scoring option, right? Like that's great, but just you want that game to game sort of effectiveness. So that's what worries me a little bit more with Tyler Higbee. But is he going to finish as a top 10 tight end? I think there's a good shot.
My mind is blown because I thought you got the target number wrong. I'm looking at it right now. You're absolutely correct. 108 targets.
Yeah.
How I've never seen a player do so little with so more
And so
before in my
that's
life.
what
That's
worries me as
incredible.
far as him being a starting tight end, but he could finish in the top 10. That's what I'm saying.
I always say I love target share. Like it's always about the target. Like you got me stuck between a rock and a hard place right now. Like, all right. I still say undraftable because I don't know, but just I don't trust anyone in McVay. I don't trust any tight end in McVay's system ever again. I've been burned by that too many times.
That's fair. That's fair. And actually, Tad, I think this will lead into our next question, which I think will be perfect. And that's from our good friend Jay, one of our loyal listeners here, is that should you draft an extra tight end or quarterback? And I think Tyler Higbee sort of plays into that strategy because I think it's pretty fair to say, Tad, that if you end up with one of the top tier options at either position, like you end up with a Patrick Mahomes, you end up with a Justin Herbert, you end up with a Jalen Hurts at quarterback, or a tight end, you end up with a Travis Kelce, a Mark Andrews, George Kittle. It's like, I don't think you need to take the backup option, or you don't need to prioritize it as much. But if you get some of those guys like in the middle rounds, like let's say you end up with a Kirk Cousins, let's say you end up with a Jared Goff, let's say you end up with Tyler Higbee in this case, let's say you end up with a Cole Kmet, I think that's when it's valuable then to add on to your bench then to get a supplemental piece, because depending on the matchups, depending on the bye weeks, depending on just how overall how their season is going to go, we don't know how it's going to go. So like you're saying with Tyler Higbee, where it's like, he only put up double-digit points once last season. So it's like game to game, it's going to be hard to trust him. So then that's where you want to pair him up with maybe more of like a guy with the high upside. So maybe you take a chance on a rookie tight end, like a Sam Laporta in Detroit, Michael Mayer in Las Vegas, maybe Dalton Kincaid in Buffalo. So then you sort of get that, like, if there's upside, if they do decide to involve him, then that's where you're sort of going to get your benefit. And then same thing at the quarterback position, where it's like you drafted Justin Fields, but last year was sort of like, he had to put the team on his back. That's why he's successful. You want to pair him up with the backup option. It's like those are sort of options that you want. So I think it's pretty clear if you get like one of those top options at either position, I don't think you need to prioritize getting a backup as much. But if you get into like the second level or third level at either position, that's where it's like good to sort of have that backup option. But what are your thoughts on this question?
I think you're right on the tight end thing of like if a good backup tight end is there towards the later rounds, like you said with Laporta, Mayer, Kincaid, because all those guys should be there. I don't think there's going to be a big run, if any, on rookie tight ends. Sure, go for it if you want to. I don't see an immediate need for a backup tight end just because they're, like we said, it's a wasteland of fantasy. So you can find a serviceable replacement should your starting tight end go down on the waiver wire. And if you're looking for a serviceable replacement, wondering which one to go for, you can check out the Desai Guys because we will have our weekly waiver wire target episodes coming out just as soon as kickoff hits. But in terms of quarterback, I say 100% always have a backup quarterback. Always. Like, no question. Always go for a backup quarterback. So if you're between the two, do I go for another tight end? Do I go for a quarterback? Always go quarterback. But like I said, regardless, that's almost always my third to last pick before I take my defense and kicker is always my backup QB.
All right.
Because think about it, like how often does like a sleeper quarterback come along on the waiver wires? Not that often, right? So that's why you draft the guy first. And then how often does a waiver wire sleeper tight end come along? At least twice, 3 times a season. So you're just playing the odds at that point.
That's fair. So I think you take either strategy there for sure. So I think either one could sort of work there.
All right. So we're gonna go rapid fire right here. You ready, Amar?
I guess so. Rapid fire is a very loose term for you.
Oh, shut up. Anyway, so this is also from our friend Jay Bear, which I am definitely now calling him from now on. So, what's your advice for handling FAAB for waivers? For those of you wondering, that is free agency or waiver wires that you actually have to put in a dollar amount for. So, it's almost like an auction draft just for the waiver wire. So, Amar, do you go for players later in the season or earlier in the season on that?
So, for me, I think it's just you have a budget. So for those who don't know, free agent allocation budget, that's what FAAB stands for, is that you get a set budget for how you handle your waiver wire throughout the entire season. So if you spend it all in week 3, you have no more money for the rest of the season. So if you get to the fantasy playoffs and you have an injury, that's what it sort of costs you, because you have to look at last season, Tad, where Lamar Jackson hurt himself in week 13 right before the fantasy playoffs. And now you're kind of screwed if you spent all your waiver wire money on your waiver wire additions earlier in the season. Now you don't know who to place at the quarterback position. Jamar Chase, he missed 4 games in the middle of the season. So if you need a replacement receiver, if you spend your money wisely, you should be able to get a good option there. So for me, I think you need to avoid spending all your money early in the season unless for sure you know that this guy is going to be a lock for your roster. I think you sort of need to analyze your roster pretty well as far as like knowing where your holes are, knowing where your bye weeks are. So you need to plan ahead as far as like, okay, may need to spend a little bit more money in week 9 when my quarterback has a bye week, or week 10 when Travis Kelce has a bye week, or, whatever it is. And so you can sort of adjust your fantasy budget as far as the quarterly picking up waivers throughout the entire season. But yeah, I'm not a fan of spending your entire budget early in the season. I think you sort of need to plan it out throughout the entire season, so you're good to compete the entire season long.
Well, I admitted being broke earlier this episode, so this probably isn't the best advice, but I completely disagree. I say not your entire budget. Granted, I think keep, a rainy day fund, but I think spend most of your budget early in the season is the way to go, because, I'm going to 2 words, my friend, James Robinson. We once on this podcast had an episode while I was sitting in a goddamn Denny's, because I finished last in my fantasy football league because I had 2 options. And it was either I was first on the waiver wire order. I either could take James Robinson or I could take, I don't even remember, because he didn't do anything after I took him. And I opted for the wrong one. And that showed me, and that was week 1. That was after James Robinson broke out that first week where he had like 50 points or whatever. And I bet wrong. And so I think that if you wait too long, that waiver wire eventually becomes very dry. You can ask me and Amir both. Doing waiver wire episodes like week 14 on is incredibly difficult because like who is still out there? So I think, sure, be conservative, but don't be too conservative.
Fair.
All right, moving on. Which rookies are good keeper options for next year? Obviously, you have your quarterbacks, which I'm sure you may touch on, but I will say one rookie to keep an eye on, and yes, I'm a little biased here, but I really do think he has some promise as the years go on in dynasty leagues. Josh Downs with the Indianapolis
I do
Colts.
like Josh Downs.
I think that could be a very interesting slot receiver that could end up paying dividends later on down the year. So I say Josh Downs is a good pick.
So for me, obviously, you want to think about keepers as far as like who are you drafting this year that's going to help you next year. So it's not necessarily like a dynasty league, right? So with keeper options, guys that probably will get drafted this year, look at the quarterbacks, you look at the top 3, you look at Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, they're all probably going to be drafted. These are guys that are probably going to make that step up next year to be more fantasy relevant. So those are possible options at the quarterback position. Running backs, obviously got to look at Bijan Robinson. You look at Jahmyr Gibbs, Devin Achane. Roshan Johnson has been looking pretty good for the Chicago Bears during preseason right now. Yeah. So that's a great guy as far as value, because you'll probably take him very towards the end of your draft. And depending on how your keeper system works, you'll either get him in the same round that you drafted him the previous year, or it'll move up 1 round. But still, that's excellent value because that's a double-digit round. You're getting a potential starting running back there with Roshan Johnson. Wide receivers, your boy Quentin Johnson, he's probably going to be drafted in the double-digit rounds. That's excellent value if he emerges as a potential starter.
That's like actually a great pick. I love that pick.
Jackson Smith-Njigba, because of Seattle's wide receivers there, you look at Tyler Lockett, you look at DK Metcalf. If one of them decides to falter or they decide to move on for one of those guys, I don't think they'll move on from any of them. But just there's a possibility if they get him more involved that he's a great value. He's probably going to go late in your draft as well. Jordan Addison, I think he's going to go at like rounds 8 or 9. So that's excellent value for next year. Zay Flowers, who I'm a fan of, Tad. I think you're a little bit more hesitant on.
I like Zay Flowers. I don't like Lamar Jackson. That's my problem.
That's fair. But he's going to be going in double-digit rounds too. So if he emerges, he's a good keeper as well. You look at Marvin Mims with Tim Patrick's injury. If he steps up this year, he'll be a good addition next
Patrick,
year.
And did they just cut someone?
KJ Hamler they released because of a medical issue. So yeah, Marvin Mims is definitely going to step up. If he emerges, that's good. And then both former Tennessee receivers, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, I think they can both possibly be good options as well.
Jalen Hyatt I like a lot. I think
exactly. And then the tight ends, we already brought up all the names there, but Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, Michael Mayer. Yep. I've already said on this podcast, I'm not a huge fan of rookie tight ends, but if you vest them this year to keep them for next year, that's where you get the most bang for your buck. So there's a lot of great options.
Kincaid's my favorite one out of that pack. I think Kincaid's going to be a big part of that offense moving forward.
For sure. For sure. All right, Tal, let's get to the next question.
All righty. Last one is, if I can find it, which players do for a fantasy resurgence? I say Calvin Ridley. I mean, what better says resurgence than exactly. Well, that's why I took it, because it's easy. It requires the least amount of effort. So of course I'm going with that path. So I mean, you also want to talk about what requires the least amount of effort is Calvin Ridley coming back in this offense, like, is going to be just smooth as butter, which is this, like, honestly physically pains me to talk up the Jaguars like this, but it's just, I can't help it. Like, this offense is going to be great. I love Etienne. I love Trevor Lawrence. I love Calvin Ridley. I still like Christian Kirk even.
Yep.
I think Kirk's fantasy value is going to be hurt a little bit, but he's still a viable wide receiver number 2. So Calvin Ridley, after a year off, I think is going to come back with absolute vengeance, and I'm absolutely miserable because of it.
Exactly. He's going to absolutely dominate this year. For me, I'm going to bring up a name that I haven't brought up yet, and that's Darnell Mooney with the Chicago Bears. So, I mean,
I like it.
He can sort of go back to how he made a name for himself in this league now with the addition of DJ Moore. So, I mean, DJ Moore's getting a lot of love. He's getting a lot of attention, which makes a ton of sense. It's a highly made acquisition by the Chicago Bears to pair it with Justin Fields. But now Darnell Mooney's going to get that supplemental piece in his offense to make him more effective too, because you had to look at last year. He was playing with the likes of Equanimeous St. Brown. He was playing with Marquise Goodwin. He was playing with these guys that are not really going to take a lot of attention away from
Chase Claypool, who didn't do shit.
That was way late in the season, but yeah, Chase Claypool to an extent. He's still on the roster this year, but just overall, when he was effective, say what you want about Allen Robinson, but when he was in Chicago, he was an effective receiver.
He was. No,
and that's how Darnell Mooney was able to emerge, because he played opposite Allen Robinson. Now you have a good piece in DJ Moore again. That's going to make Darnell Mooney that much more effective. So I expect him to really come back. He also dealt with some injuries last year as well, so that sort of hindered him too. But the addition of DJ Moore is really going to help Darnell Mooney. I think he's going a lot later in drafts. He's excellent value that you want to pick up on.
No, I love that. I think that's a perfect, like I said, like usually like third to last round before you go defense kicker. I usually take a backup quarterback. If, a quarterback slipping, sometimes I take one earlier than that. But yeah, if Mooney is there in the last like 4 rounds and you're just like, fuck it, let's take a flyer. That is like the perfect flyer to take, because there's nothing wrong with it. Some receivers, like you said, just thrive in the number 2 role. And like, that's their niche, whatever. That's how you say it.
Niche. Yeah, you said it right.
Niche. Okay, I stumbled. But anyway, that's where they thrive, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think that Darnell Mooney, if DJ Moore can live up to expectations, that's a big thing. Because if DJ Moore falters, then Darnell Mooney is not going to be able to thrive. But if it works out the way everyone expects it to, I could definitely see Darnell Mooney having a good bounce back season. I know.
It's like what, 4:30 your time?
I'm trying to talk fast. That's the problem. Is I'm trying to go rapid fire here. So yeah, so Darnell Mooney, good pick. Bottom line, shut up.
For sure. All right, so that's actually, we got through all our questions. Unless, Tad, you got some more through the text line, like your group chat or whatever. But I think we got through
I have one
all the questions that were submitted to us.
I have one last one. It's directed at the two of us.
Okay.
I don't really want to read this, but I guess I have to at this point.
Do it.
How can a team managed by 2 people be so bad at fantasy baseball?
How are we bad though? We're in contention right now.
That's going to be my response once this recording is up. But yeah. So hold on. Apparently. Oh, okay. All right. This is a good one. Oh, fucking shit. I hate this one, but this is a good, real quick question. What's the best destination for Jonathan Taylor?
Oh, interesting. That's a good question. I'd have to think about this one, but honestly, the Rams. They sort of have, I know we're sort of talking about Cam Akers, but they could sort of use a bit of a more of an upgrade at the running back position to sort of make that running game more effective, to sort of pair up with Cooper Kupp in the passing offense. Hopefully they figure out those secondary options in the passing offense, but just, if you have that kind of running back in your offense, that's just going to make your team that much more dangerous, where you don't need to rely on the passing offense that much. You sort of shift to being more of a ground and pound type of offense, which is something Sean McVay can do as well. So Los Angeles Rams would be a good destination, depending on how things play out in Tennessee. If they move on from Derrick Henry, Taylor's a good upgrade there.
Do not put that evil on me, Rick Bobby. Don't you do that.
Think they trade within the division, but I mean, the option is out there as far as just a possible destination as to something that could happen there. Try to think what else, but those would probably be the top two off the top of my head. Oh, Baltimore. Like, I mean, I know they've had issues with injuries in the running back situation, but him landing in Baltimore, like, just he would absolutely kill it with Lamar Jackson, that RPO option. Like, that would be pretty dangerous too. So yeah, I'd probably give those three teams off the top of my head.
Him in Baltimore would be pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. Well, all right. So promise is a promise. That question was posed by Kevin Kizik, who can go fuck himself. The correct answer is the Indianapolis Colts.
If you say so. If you say so.
I do say so. The problem is Jim Irsay doesn't.
Exactly. He's too busy trying to save an orca whale instead of figuring out his
I'm trying to save the whales, man. It's okay, though, because apparently the NFL won't care when either one of them is dead or whatever the hell that quote was.
Yeah. So interesting.
I hate my life.
Guys, we appreciate all the questions that were submitted, and we hopefully, I think we got to all the questions. We got to some additional questions as well. But just, yeah, I mean, guys, like we talked about at the beginning of the episode too, I mean, perfect timing. You're seeing the ticker down below. Make sure you're interacting with us on social media so we can answer your questions all season long, because just because we answered the majority of the questions today, that doesn't mean your questions stop, because you could get hyper specific like our good friend Jay with his draft, or you can get pretty broad with Chauncey and some of his questions as far as like just being, just general advice.
So broad that we went for 3 hours on his podcast.
It's true. So, I mean, guys, whatever your questions are, we are here to help you out. So make sure you're following us. You got us on Twitter. You got me at @Desai23. You got Tad at Desai94. You got the show handle at the Desai Guys. And, of course, on Instagram at the Desai Guys as well. Make sure you interact with us. Submit all your questions, whether it pertains to the draft, whether it pertains to in-season with waiver and trade advice, whether it's like figuring out your fantasy punishment. Tad does a fantasy punishment in his league, so he's probably got a bunch of ideas for you. So
speaking of Kevin, by the way, who submitted the Jonathan Taylor question, he had to go to Dallas Wings game by himself on a Sunday afternoon. That was his punishment.
There you go. So, I mean, Tad's probably got a lot of great options for you if you need a fantasy punishment. Yes, so, I mean, please, guys, whatever your question is, submit it to us. We're happy to help you out with anything and everything pertaining to fantasy football. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. You're always up to date with our fantasy advice through the podcast, whether that's on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. You can listen right on the LEFA Network website. Subscribe. Always be up to date with the podcast. You're watching us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you're always up to date with our YouTube video YouTube content as well. And of course, make sure you're supporting our parent network, LEFB Network. Ryan was so supportive in submitting us some questions, but he's also so supportive in letting us host this podcast on LEFB Network. So make sure you're giving them a follow. They got you covered with the professional level with the Rams and the Chargers. And of course, the college level, they got you covered there with the USC Trojans and the UCLA Bruins. So, I mean, guys, they got you covered on all LA football sports for sure there. And I mean, guys, fantasy season is upon us. I mean, we can't keep stressing this enough, but we are here to help you. So make sure you're reaching out to us. We'd love to help you win some titles. And to everybody who's already doing that, who's reading our articles on the website, make sure you go to our website. We got some articles coming out there too. Who subscribe to the podcast, listening, watching, following, interacting. I mean, just anything and everything you're doing in between there, guys. We really can't thank you enough.
And, this kind of speaks to something I tell my students a lot when I point to the classroom rules of this like poster board with my terrible handwriting on the wall. I go, that is not set in stone. That is a living document. It changes throughout the year. Same thing with this episode. This episode is not where we stop with giving you guys advice. It is a living thing. It's like we want to give you guys advice, whether it be through the episodes or whether it be through social media interaction. That includes YouTube as well. I know a lot of people don't count that as social media. At this point, they might as well. So YouTube comments, Twitter replies, Instagram comments, whatever it is. If you need, look at the question we took from Jay. I'm drafting this specific spot. We just spent like 10 minutes of our podcast on that. So if you have a specific fantasy question, we are here for you. We'd love to help you out. You know what? There's no better word for it. Fantasy football is our addiction. It is especially mine. I will definitely speak to this. It is my addiction. It is unhealthy, but you know
really
what?
Quick, Dad, how many leagues are you playing in this year?
Oh God, 6.
Yeah,
five or 6.
So it's very much an addiction. I've been 7.
Yes. No, it's bad. It's bad. It's like, it's like the Dave Chappelle thing. Like,
any more than fantasy football leagues?
So trust us, you're not bothering us. We love it. We welcome any questions you have. So even though we are ending this episode in just a couple seconds, please hit us up with any questions, any concerns you might have about your fantasy league in the upcoming year. So as always, thank you everyone so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, stay safe, everyone, and happy draft season.